to Cashrules. My name is Nick Foley. I'm with the man, the myth, the legend, Nick Gilmore. How you doing, my man?
Just dandy. How about yourself?
Pretty good, bud. Pretty good. I'm always good when we get a time to spend an hour or so a week hanging out, talking business and real estate. It's always a good learning experience for me. Where are you today? You look like you got a lot going on there. That's not your normal office.
I know. I was just waiting for you to ask that. It's like, so I had to come over here to my dad's office, and I'm like 20, 25 minutes early so I could set everything up. And I get my computer open and, my keyboard out. There's like shit. There's 4 chairs in this office. It's like 10 by 10. You can't move. There's no plugs. Like there's 2 plugs in the entire office. There's like 4 power bars plugged into each other. This massive, whatever the fuck that is. And like, it's just, I don't know. As you saw earlier when we were chatting, I was very unprepared to get started, but
it's all right. We're here now. And I think that's, there's something, what is it? You can't fix it, feature it, right? Isn't that
exactly?
Is that what you were saying? So, you know what? Hey, listen, you're one thing about you, Nick, is you weren't prepared, but you are prepared. You're always prepared. And I think that's a interesting start off point for us is, it may not look, like polished and beautiful, like, your background and things like that, because there's a lot going on, but, talk a little bit about the fact that you need to be always prepared. No matter what it is, you got to be ready. And what does that mean to you? I just thought we'd just get that started. In fact, it wasn't anything. That's what I like about this. By the way, I'm just going to say this. That's what I like about, doing this dialogue is sometimes, we have a set. We don't know what we're going to talk about, but we do know what we're going to say. Or no, we don't know what we're going to say, but we know what we're going to talk about. But this kind of came up, and it's just about preparedness and even when you're unprepared, that you're ready to act. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that for our entrepreneurs listening today.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, I didn't see that in the show notes, and then you're kind of veering in that direction. I'm like, uh-oh, what did I miss? But I mean, it's super important. And even if you look at, my early days as being an entrepreneur and a business owner, people will see me on here now, and a lot of people, and we've actually had people comment, like, what business do you have giving business advice? But they didn't see the first 10 years that I put in and did nothing or said nothing. And I think, Gary Vee said the same thing. He has a lot to say now because for the first 15 or 20 years of his career, he said nothing. So those years, I took those years to prepare for everything that I had coming in terms of the real estate, the meat shop, the customer service, the networking. All this shit that we're doing now, I took that time to learn, right? And I equipped myself to be able to win in all these different situations. And you still learn, every day. And I mean, you are huge about this, but, you need to learn something every day. What did you learn today? What did you learn this week? Being accountable, documenting it. And that's super important to be, I think, mindful of, your weekly actions, but ultimately, it was very front-loaded in terms of equipping myself to be prepared for any type of situation.
Yeah, no, I like that. I had a motto when I was cycling across the country a few years ago, where it's get comfortable being uncomfortable. You know what I mean? And so when it's raining out and it was snowing and it was windy, I felt comfortable because I trained for all that. You know what I mean? Yeah. I did the training in the I remember. Distinctly one time I was training for this ride and my wife, it was pouring rain. And my wife said, it was in October. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm just getting ready to, she saw me come down in my bike garb. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm just like, I got to train because this is the environment I'm going to see. I'm going to have to ride. And you know what? Honestly, it's exactly what happened on the ride. I wake up, I open the curtains in the hotel and it is blowing wind and rain and sleet. But, and the people that were with me, are just there's no way we're doing this today. I'm like, no, we're riding, and you got to be prepared to you got to be prepared to make sure that you're prepared even when you're not feeling totally prepared, as they say. So that's a lot.
And it's uncomfortable. It's not like it's fun to be able to, or fun to have to get up super early and execute and have the workout or, write emails or cut meat or, stock shelves or whatever. It sucks and it's so hard. And if you're not prepared to do these things, and you're not expecting it, it'll beat you down and leave you like a bloody pulp in the street. But if you're ready and you're like, okay, the next 10 years of my life is going to be shit because I'm going to be working 100 hours a week, 7 days a week, and you're prepared to work when you don't feel well, and you're prepared to work when, you know, your furnace blows up, and you're prepared to work when you have to walk because your car broke down. Well, that's what separates the true entrepreneurs and the people who, you know, want to have a business but get drunk on the weekend. Mm-hmm. And also, one other thing, further to what you said earlier about the office, the guys with the messiest offices, and I don't mean in terms of like a retail office where there's like a revolving door of people coming in, but typically the guys with the messiest offices are the guys with the most going on and the most successful. If you see a guy in a like super dapper suit, Rolex, you know, hair all fucking slicked back, his office is perfect, there's nothing on the desk, chances are that guy's a poser.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting observation, man. And I've seen that, right, where they got a lot, because and like they say, like, you know, entrepreneurs, a lot of people, they've got they're creative as well, and they've got a lot going on. Like you have, you know, and I know this just because I, like, you know, without getting into too much of the detail, but just because I know you've got, you know, 4 or 5 different deals and things happening, and the things with the business, and having a partnership with your brothers, and, you know, and all that stuff. You got so much, you know, on your plate personally and professionally that, you know, I can understand where that mindset comes from. You're a successful guy. So a lot happened this week, man. Let's catch up on that. Let's talk a little bit. Last week we talked a little bit about interest rates. Is there anything else like that you wanted to add to that? I know we did talk about it a bit. They raised. We did see that they did raise. It wasn't an astronomical huge bump, but I'd like to see what your thoughts are after we talked about it the day before they raised. This is the reason why I'm bringing this up. I know this aired just as it was coming out, but just would like to get your thoughts on that before we catch up on some other things.
I mean, ultimately, what you're always going to see a checks and balances type system where if things are getting out of whack, then we're going to try and reel them back in. So ultimately, things are inevitable when the economy goes one way. Now, that being said, when you're in a global pandemic and there's different variables that are playing into it, the formula is going to change a little bit because different things affect other things, and you really need to be careful about how you turn these dials because you don't want to catastrophically impact something else. So, I mean, we all know how the economy works. It's been the same for a long time. It will continue to be the same. But ultimately, we can predict what's going to happen, you know, moving forward based on the last 50 years. So it was like what I told you about the chart. It was a New York Stock Exchange or TSX chart. It was a graph over the years. It was like from 1991 till whenever the guy gave it to me, which was like 2015. And he's like, would take periods of time, and he put his hand on each side of the graph. So like, let's say 91 and 94. And he's like, well, what happened here? I'm like, it kind of went up, then went down, and it's kind of at the same place. And then he would move his hands. He's like, okay, what happened here? Okay, it went up. Okay. And then he did that through the whole chart. And then he put his hands across the whole thing. And he said, what happened here? And I was like, well, it went up a lot. He's like, yes, of course it did. So that's the mindset. What you need that mindset when it comes to investing, because it's the long play. The long play, the execution of short-term goals will ultimately lead you to success of your long-term goal. But, you know, any type of investment, in my opinion, is typically long-term.
Yeah, I like that. You know, it's interesting, and bringing that back to real estate, which is more, you know, where my domain, and I know yours and such. And when I say my domain, I mean I'm learning a lot about it and that. And so you know, it was interesting. So I was talking to a guy today, and he was mentioning about a lot of people are buying, Nick, but they're not too worried about the cash flow of it right now because they're betting on appreciation. And that just speaks to what you're talking about, right? Like I was looking at a quadplex a fourplex in Belleville, and the rents were so, we're so cheap. Like it just wasn't, they're one bedrooms and the rents are really, really low, right? Which is, fine. But the reality of is it wasn't, it wasn't cash flowing, but I wasn't too concerned about that. But the reality is that bigger people with bigger capital, with more capital, were coming in and being able to look at it and be like, I'll operate this on a loss. And first of all, don't get me wrong. I am not one of these people that are like, well, damn those big people that have the more capital, because they were me once before. And I know me, and I know that I'll just continue to build and grow and like get to a level where, like where you're at, where you have the more capital at your expense and things. But this gentleman that I was talking to, a buddy of mine, he was saying, he goes, the big thing about that, Nick, though, is like they're coming in and they don't mind losing money weekly or monthly because they're betting on the appreciation. And I think they're right. And I think that just speaks to what you're talking about. It's about the long-term game.
On the other side of that, what we've seen, at least when you want to buy a multiplex, and I believe that the bank takes this approach when it becomes a commercial deal. So something around 6 units or more, they'll typically use an income approach to value the property. So they'll find out how much it's making, what are the expenses. The mortgage isn't included in this, by the way. It's just your fixed expenses in terms of operating. So they'll take what the property generates minus that, and then that cash flow or what's left over, they apply the cap rate to it in that area. So the cap rate is different in different areas.
Sure.
And it's directly proportional to the value of the building. So what you see is a lot of like old school investors or families who have had a couple buildings but really didn't know. They've just kept the rent the same because they wanted to be good people.
Yeah.
But at the detriment of their investment. Because if the rents stay the same, ultimately the value of the property stays the same.
Yeah.
It will go up a bit for different reasons, but it won't, ultimately it doesn't increase. So you need to really be conscious of what you're charging for rent, what market rent is, what's your cap rate, so that your investment can grow through the years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But the thing, I mean, our listeners in Ontario would know this. We're only allowed as landlords, as owners of the building, to move. I'm not talking commercial. I'm talking residential, commercial, like people that are living in your buildings. You only move it up like 1.25% a year, right?
But that's a seller problem too, because they fucked themselves. So like you had said, these properties are coming. The only real people who are buying them are people who can use the loss.
Yeah.
Because they'll pay more so that they can claim a loss against X, Y, or Z, ultimately putting them in a favorable tax position because they have way more income somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right. So these, kind of upside down projects are useful to some, but the vendor, there's not a million people out there with money that they can put out like that and buy it cash.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good point. You wrote a really interesting article in Entrepreneurial magazine about doubling your income. Can you talk a little bit about that? And actually, for people that are you talk about it, Nick.
No, go ahead. What were you going to say? Were you going to say something nice about
it? I was just going to check. I didn't want to. I was going to plug that magazine, but I was just going to say we'll put it in the show notes. But check out the article. It's on entrepreneurial.com. And really, really well written. And you talk about doubling your income. I just wanted to talk about that a little bit.
So basically what it says, and whether people agree with this or not, and here's the fucking thing. I hate this saying with a passion. Work smarter, not harder. Because people, and don't get me wrong, you need to work smart. But working smart is a byproduct of being a good entrepreneur. You're not some fucking doofus I'm going to start a business. I need to work smarter now. And boom, you're a fucking genius. So it's just like good food is a product of us. We're not going to put out shitty meat. It's assumed we're going to put out good meat. So what are the other things that play into that equation? So I basically go into talking about doubling your efforts to double your income. So if you want to make twice as much money, you need to work twice as hard. You need to put twice as many hours in. I guarantee it will more than double if you do that. But you got to be honest with yourself, right? You can't just think you're working twice as hard or convince yourself you're working twice as hard and then you don't make the money and you're like, that didn't work. You truly need to invest every single resource times 2. And if you are honest with yourself and you do it and educate yourself on how to do it, I guarantee your revenue will double.
Yeah, no, it's a really interesting point, man. And I think that there's something to be said about that. And like, even surrounding yourself with like people, like coaches and things like that, like not coaches that are not qualified to do it. Like you're not going to hire an entrepreneurial coach to tell you how to run a marathon. You know what I mean? But you can exponentially double your learning curve or your income when you're doing things like that, right? When you're working twice as hard or twice as smart. And it's funny you say that, like, don't work harder, work smarter. And I think you're right. It is a byproduct of experience, but like automation, right, is an example of working hard to work smart.
Yeah.
Right. Like doing your payroll where you put it in and you're not calculating, Johnny's payroll and doing the deductions and things like that. Working smart is putting it into a system that shoots out the payroll. Right. And getting to a point where you get to that point where you instill that automation so that it frees you up. Right.
Exactly. And then you reallocate your time. That's what I was just going to say, because you're not just doing that and then doing nothing.
100%.
You're doing that. Okay, now I'm growing. What else am I doing? Am I working on this business? Am I buying another rental property? Yeah. So your time is always filled. Yeah. It's just if something can help that, okay, implement that. That's working smart. Now the hard part of that is, okay, now I'm filling these hours again. Yeah,
I totally agree. I was actually talking to my bookkeeper excuse me, the other day, and she said, Nick, like with your HST, it's that you have it so laid out, it's really simple. Like I can just teach you how to do it. And I sent her a message back. I'm like, you are freeing up so much time for me. Like I send you my revenue and I send you my expenses. You work out my HST, and I just know what I have to pay. I'm like, that's good business for me because I can allocate, like you said, my time somewhere else. You know what I mean? So very smart, very smart. Okay, you want to get into some questions? We've got a lot of them today.
Let's do it.
Such a cool transition we have. Like it's so bad ass. All right. Yeah.
Isn't exactly. It nice? Like dollar bill?
All right. We talked a little bit about this last week, so I wanted to carry this question over, Nick. What are the 5 C's of credit?
So I'm taking this one? Am I? Okay. We put a post out and it was like, I was watching this documentary and it was so funny because they were talking about the 3 C's of credit. And this was like back in the 1960s and 70s. And I'm like, 3 C's? What the fuck? And I guess like back then there was only 3 C's. So what these are, what the reason for them is the ability of someone to pay back debt. Okay, so what the bank looks at when they are going to lend you money, how capable are you going to be able to pay that debt back? And these different things, they all are weighted differently in the formula, but they ultimately build your reputation for being able to borrow. So capacity is number 1. I've got them right in front of me here because I was hoping I could pull up what the US top 3 were and what were added in. We should look that up, but capacity is how much, right? So how much can you afford? That's basic. That's simple. What can this person afford to pay back on a monthly basis or whatever? Capital, how much do you have? And then this is something you and I have talked about before, skin in the game. And it changes the how exposed the bank is, because if you have a bunch of money tucked away, chances are you're going to be able to save yourself if things go tits up. Someone like me or someone like you, if you're always growing and you're always putting money out into the markets, you don't always have a huge nest egg, right? The banks don't like that. Collateral. If you own a bunch of shit, they want to tie it up. I'm going to say the last one because it's my favorite. What's the market conditions like? So that's number 4, conditions. Meaning, are we in a recession? Are we going through a crazy housing boom and this person wants to leverage the fuck out of their house to buy a fucking Lear jet? Well, maybe the conditions right now are good, but say this person owns a restaurant and we're in the uncertain times of COVID. Well, if the restaurant closes and he can't pay back the lien on his house, and then he probably shouldn't have got the jet. I know that's an extreme example, but it's true. People do this, not for jets, but for speedboats and other stupid shit. Mm-hmm. The last one. This one's my favorite, and I never knew about this. And it's character. So it's you as a person. And I would really like, and if there's anybody who works at the bank who could give us a weighting system of how the bank uses these to determine your credit, because it's so automated. How can they determine credit? How can something that doesn't know you or determine your character? How is it able to determine your character? And when I did, and I told you about this, and we've talked about it several times, I did we had a podcast, and I was talking about bankers and how many great ones I deal with, but I've dealt with so many shitty ones. And I had said they just plug it into a system and blah, 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 blah. Well, I ended up getting fucking lambasted and slapped on the wrist from a bank I deal with because they were like, well, why are you talking about us that way? But I wasn't talking about them. I was talking about someone else. But it was funny to me how it's so automated when you're trying to become a customer. But the second that they got butthurt or they were upset of something I said, then it's like you're not even a customer anymore. So yeah. I don't know. It was.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because you can't scale. There's no metric for character, right? And so it's interesting because these other 4 that you talk about, conditions, capital, conditions, collateral, and what's the 4th one?
Capacity.
Those things you can put on a metric. You could scale, you could look at that and see based on the numbers and the information that you're getting. But character is a different thing, and so it's based on essentially, does the person like you or not, right? Mm-hmm. And that person, where are they? Do they have good character? I mean, it's such character is such a term that's so nuanced. And what I mean by that is there's just so many different interpretations of what the word means. There are people out there that think that you have good character, that you don't have good character, that I have good character. That it doesn't matter because it's an interpretation of another person's view of you is your character. Your character as an individual is different because you do good things, you try to do well by people, you're a kind person, you inherently have good character. But another person's interpretation of that is so subjective to their views and ideals of the world that it's a difficult one to measure. So, anyway.
And it was bullshit too. And the reason I brought that story up was because someone I deal with was like, oh, and who works at the bank. He's like, you got to be careful because, they look at your character and you don't want to, eliminate yourself from the bank wanting to deal with you. And I'm like, first of all, the first thing that goes in my head is because I made a video telling the truth of how you qualify for a loan determines my character. Because I can tell you if that guy's kid was in a fucking burning car and I had a 50% chance of dying or saving the baby, I would run and save the baby.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So to me, that determines your character is what type of a person you are. Like you just said, it's not, even that we're educating people on how they can get ahead, for fuck's sakes.
Mm-hmm.
Who gives a rat's ass? Like, because you got offended?
Mm-hmm.
Big deal.
Yeah, they look at big picture. I mean, you can't judge a person's character by an hour segment that they do on a weekly basis off the side of their desk to try to, help people do the best they can. You know what I mean? Like, we're not sponsored by Spotify or anything like that. It's just two guys it's your show, man. I'm just trying to ask questions to get the good stuff out of you. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the thing. Like, so it's interesting. Like, I just feel, Nick, that you're right about that. You're right about the character. Like, if they follow you around long enough and they know you, they know who you are and what your ideals are, then they're going to get a good view of it, right? So getting a message from a bank or a person that that says, oh, you got to be careful because they're watching. Well, that's all they get to go on. Then I guess that's all they get to go on. But what are you going to do? You just
further to that, if one of the banks offered me $1 million and said, you got to come on here and tell your listeners how great we are and that they'll always win with us, that's the only condition, and we'll give you $1 million, I would not take the money, because I have more pride in helping people and being honest about my struggles and what I've done than taking a payout.
Yeah.
So I think that is another reason that would be kind of something a metric you could measure my character with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's a good question. And yeah, this is a debate. We could talk the whole, the whole podcast on the 5 C's of credit. That's for sure. So
that's the difference with us, though. I just want to throw this in too quickly for anybody who's listening, because there's so many people out there that are just trying to make money off putting the content out. Like, we make money doing other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So people to sponsor us and to promote this and whatever, we don't care, because we're not going to be out of job. We're going to continue doing this forever. And I'm not saying people don't sponsor and do other stuff, but we are never going to be swayed by any type of monetary bonus. No. This is always going to be like the raw, real truth. Mm-hmm. And if that's what you like, then keep listening. And if you don't, then, close your computer and fuck off.
or just go or subscribe to a different podcast. But I get what you're saying. There's a different way of looking at it. Like, it's funny when you're talking about deploying capital, you said something interesting about that. It's like, it's how much you bring into the game. What does a bank typically like to see when you're looking for money from a bank? And they say, because the question that I get from investors all the time is like, well, how much skin in the game do you have? Right. And I understand that there's lots of different interpretations of skin, but mostly the metric for that is money. So how much capital, like if you're looking for a $500,000, or $1 million or whatever it is, like what kind of capital do you need to have? Is it usually 35, 20%, things like that? Or they want to see that? Or how's that work the best? Just for our listeners.
If it's a commercial deal, typically 35%. It can vary. It can come down. If it's owner occupied, it can go up, depending on if you're dealing with like a tier 1 bank or BDC or whatever. Residential, 20%, usually. Now that can decrease if it's a CMHC secured loan. So if CMHC steps in and said, yes, we'll guarantee this, we're a government entity, we'll guarantee this up to 95% loan to value, then the borrower only has to come up with 5%. Now, there's other qualifications that surround that type of a loan. But to answer the question, 20% for residential, 35% for commercial.
Good. I just wanted to get that cleared for our listeners. Okay, next question. What is something you use to stay focused during difficult times? Oh, this is a good question.
This is a great question. I'm just going to unplug this beauty.
So I'm going to go ahead and give my insight while you're unplugging and doing toggle stuff, okay? All right. So one of the things, and this is a good question. So what is something that you use to stay focused during difficult times? What I try to do is remain consistent with the way that I follow my day or set up my day, and how I stay consistent with measuring my day and my week. So no matter how hard my day is or how difficult my week's been or whatever that may be, I always score my day. I set aside 10 principles. I started with 1 or 2, and I just started to score them. So I started with like emotional intelligence, and just like how I'm interacting with people, how I'm self-regulating, how I'm managing myself and others, things like that. And I give myself a score. And then I went to like mental focus. How much am I, being focused? am I right? And I write it down in like a metric to follow. And I write down these 5 things. And if I do these 5 things, I give myself a score out of 5. And honestly, man, for me, that's how I stay focused during difficult times, because no matter how busy or how hard it is, at the end of every day or in the morning of the next morning, I write down the day before score, like on what I'm measuring. And now I'm up to 10 things that I call my principles, cornerstone principles, and I calculate them at the end of every week. I have it set up on an Excel spreadsheet, and I just put in the numbers, and then it just automatically calculates. And then I put it on a chart, and I can see, I know exactly what every week has been since January 1st of this year, but dating back even to last year and beyond. So that's what I try to do is to stay consistent, even in the good times, as I do stay consistent in the times that I'm finding it difficult. And then that gives you a real snapshot of your year. So I was able to look at my year last year and be like, you know what, in the middle part of the year, I wasn't good. I was operating at a 50, 60% percentile. But near the end of the year, I was picking things up again. Maybe it's the fourth quarter, maybe, I don't know. But I was operating at like a 75 to 80% percentile based on my own metric. And so now I'm just trying to operate at the highest percentage that I can operate on based on my metric, and just stay as focused as I want. I know it sounds a little bit high bar. If anybody has any questions about it, I'm more than happy to give you the information and show you how to do it. But that's what I do, is to remain consistent in the hard times and in the prosperous ones.
And anybody who's listening, this is why Nick and I are such a good combination of views, because when I started into business and when I was working really hard, I've got, like, yes, you need to work hard. Yes, you need to work all the time, but you got to keep it balanced with the things that keep you sane, I'll say. Because my brother was always like, you're like a 1980s stockbroker, smoking cigarettes, cocaine, and drinking all the time. I wasn't doing those things, but he was just comparing me to the crazy life. So you'll eat once a day, or, you maybe sometimes I wouldn't eat at all, or work, and always thinking, not sleeping very much. So he was comparing like their lifestyle back in the 80s. Now, Nick has taught me to be able to continue doing that. So continue to go be crazy working, but also do it in a manner that's going to be, number one, you're going to be able to continue doing it, be consistent at it. And number two, it eases the strain on the mental aspect of it, because you can work like crazy for a long time, but it always catches up on you. So you got to find out how you can keep this in check when you're working all the time.
Mm-hmm. Like that. Yeah. So is there something that you do, Nick, to kind of to help you through the difficult times then? How you stay focused? I know you give some good insight there, but what do you do to help you, just to stay focused when it's really difficult?
It's tough. It's fucking hard, man, especially for me, because I was the type of guy, and I really am, like, still kind of, where I don't like to talk to anyone. Like, if I've got something going on in my life, I just keep it to myself and deal with it.
Yeah.
But actually having somebody there who you can trust and talk to, I don't know that we put enough value on that in society. Because, as a guy, especially how I grew up, you had to be tough. You had to, be a man. You had to do all these things that, were very important to our family. But like being emotional or being worked up about something, those things weren't allowed.
Yeah.
So in order to transition myself to how I think now, it doesn't make me less of a man or less tough or whatever. Not that being tough is important, but being internally tough is important. But you can be a certain way and still talk to people and be emotional. And like, we're humans. Emotion is a regular occurrence. Like, that's what we do. And I think that was something that I really undervalued, and it's uncomfortable for me to do anything, to talk to anybody about, different types of emotions. But that is something that's really helped me, because I've gone through super fucking difficult times, like in the last 10 years, and you always make it through. It's always a new day. The sun's always, it's always shining.
Yeah.
And, does it rain? Yeah. But the rain makes you appreciate those sunny days. And you need to fucking learn to sit with it. You taught me this, because there's something that, like, addicts or people who suffer with mental illness, they'll fall into, a drug or alcohol or whatever, because they don't want to sit in the pain of depression or whatever they're dealing with. So they'll go there. It's not like, oh, I want to get drunk because it feels good. It's because maybe something's triggered them and they're going to that place. So you always say, or I've heard you say, you need to be prepared to sit in the dirt.
Yep.
And if you need somebody, I'll sit in the dirt with you.
Yep.
And it's a very uncomfortable place to be. It's probably the worst fucking place you can be, period. Okay? And I'm not talking about physical locations. I'm talking about sitting and being in that spot. And when you can learn to be there, when you can learn to fucking sit in that dirt, nothing can fucking stop you at all.
Yeah, no, I like that. That's what I was pointing in my head. I was like, sitting there mentally, right, Nick? Like, and just sometimes you go to those dark places. But if you can sit in the mud, sit in the dirt, be in the trenches, then, pick your metaphor. You're going to grow those, you're going to grow those experiences, the calluses, and and be able to work your way to a point where you feel comfortable, you feel like yourself. But I feel I think you nailed it on the head. I'm not going to say anything else to it, but I think that it's so true. Like, if you learn to sit in the dirt, you realize, that's where the growth lies. That's where the growth lies. So,
and I'm not saying that I can do this. I'm not saying I can always go there and be there, because I can't. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's not a place you want to be going all the time either. But when life takes you there, you need to be ready to accept it and then handle it without, going to the outside of that to deal with it.
Yep. Yeah. No, good insight. All right. Next one here. How do you build connections with mentors, and why is this important?
Huge. Fuck, I feel like we talk about this every week, but I'm glad, because it's huge. So you need to find them. Like, I didn't go and get an MBA and fucking attend a really super prestigious college in the States or university in Canada. Like, I did none of that. I had a meat shop. I had one meat shop north of Kingston. But there just so happens to be a whole bunch of really nice lakes with really nice cottages on them. And a lot of those people are entrepreneurs. So I'd ask questions when I'd be getting them something. What do you do? Oh, I run a tech company in Toronto. We have a cottage down here. We come down in the summertime. Oh, really? Next time they'd come in, I'd ask them something about the company. Next time they'd come in, I would ask. And eventually you develop a rapport and a trust with that person where they're comfortable sharing information. It wasn't like the first time I met them, I'm asking for their, revenue projections for the fourth quarter. I'm just genuinely curious.
Yeah.
And you kind of learn how to gauge this attack, or I guess this type of method, by learning how people are. So some people are a little more open to talk and some people aren't. But you need to kind of be able to feel that before you start over asking questions, and then you'll just piss them off.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's important to have those. And I think you nailed it. I think that, people want to help though, right? Like how many people have you help lots of people. I mean, I know I asked you a ton of questions and comes to real estate and business transaction and deals and things like that. Like I think that people that are in positions of success and wealth, they want to help. It's just not a lot of people ask them, right? And they don't, it's not up to them to come to you. If you want the mentorship or you want the knowledge, then it's up to you to go to them. And I think that, if our listeners today take anything from this this podcast today, it really is like, open up your horizons by asking people for advice and calling them, or maybe you don't have a number, but like, messaging them on DM, like most people have social media, like sending them a message, send them an email, whatever, if they still do that anymore, emails, but you can get a hold of people, you know what I mean? And just ask for their time. It doesn't necessarily mean like you have to phone the person, but if you have a question, and then, it goes from there. And I think you did a really great job there with like forging those like building the foundation of those relationships based on commonality that you were giving them meat so that they can go up to their cottages, and then you were asking questions, right? But you don't lead with, Trump right away, right? Like you're not asking for fourth quarter projections, but
no.
You're talking about business. And I think that's important, right? I think it's so important to connect with people that are at a level that you either want to attain or that you want to learn from, because they operate at a high level.
And ultimately, I feel, and I say this always about business giving back to the community. So looking at it from a business standpoint, the business in the community, it's our duty to provide something to that community and also to give back to that community. Now, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, I believe the same. It is our duty as entrepreneurs to help fellow entrepreneurs coming up. It's our duty, because there's nothing out there that helps right now. Are there like brand new college courses they're introducing, and there's, stuff you can read on the internet, and there's Gary Vee and all that stuff on there too, but there's nothing that's really out there to help you determine if this is the life for you. But a skill I have, and every other entrepreneur has, is I can talk to you for 10 minutes and tell in, 10 minutes that this is or will not be for you based on what you say and what you do. Mm-hmm. And it's not for 99% of people.
Yeah. No, that's it, right? That's the mentorship that people provide. And like you said, it's up to entrepreneurs, especially ones that are successful, to go out there and, and provide that value to other people. It's so important. Last question. How do you build the foundation blocks of dedication before you get into being an entrepreneur?
You don't. You can't. You can read and listen to me and listen to you and Google all this fucking, I want to open a business and what should I do? You can do all of that. But until you are actually knee deep in fucking cow shit, trying to execute, and you got people calling in sick, and you got fucking the barn out back is on fire, like literally on fucking fire, and your car just got fucking smashed into by a dump truck, and you got 15 customers standing waiting to get served, and the fucking meat truck's not coming because it's a fucking snowstorm. It's impossible to prepare for that. You can't. There's fucking like things that, there's been days and it's just like, what in the fuck did I do to deserve this? Like, it's just an absolute gong show. But you get through it because you're an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs get through it. And there's a good saying, and it's, don't let the customer see the kitchen on fire.
Yeah.
So everything could be going fucking crazy, but I'm always able to kind of keep it in check and, put on your best face when you're talking to someone, because let me tell you, they don't give a fuck that your Honda Civic just got fucking backed into by a dump truck. Trust me. But they do want to talk about fucking how to cook this roast the best. And you damn well better tell them how to do it with a fucking smile. Because that's what you do, and that's what's required of you. So if, you got to not wear your heart on your sleeve and really just be prepared to deal with some crazy shit. Yeah,
and I feel like all the experience that you have up to that case, right, up to that moment, allows you to, answer those questions right. Because people are like we're all self-absorbed. Like, yeah, it sucks that your Civic got knocked into, but like, so how do I got my in-laws coming over. How do I cook this turkey? You know what I mean? And it's just like, right. Yeah, this is how you do it. And you got to realize when you have that shirt on that says, Gilmore's Meat, or that hat, like, and you're there every night, like, they're not so worried about what's going on in your personal life. And it can be completely on fire. My wife said that to me one time. She said, it's interesting. She's like, the girls she's a nurse. Shout out to all the nurses. We're huge fans, right, Nick? And so it was interesting because
big fan of nurses.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it was interesting because she's like, some of the people that she works with at on her floor, they bring their stuff with them. Like, they bring their, like, all the stuff that's going on in their life. They're just like, oh, my husband's this and I was like, so what do you like? Do you do the same thing? She's like, well, I just feel like if you're at work, you're at work. Like, it doesn't matter if you're going through a breakup or you're going through, like, you got things going on at home with your husband, your wife, or boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever, your brother, sister, doesn't matter. When you're at work, you're at work. And, that lays down a good foundation because you have that balance of, you've done it before, you've been there, and sometimes you got to departmentalize what you're doing and keep it separate. And then when you come off your shift, then maybe you deal with it then. But, people want your attention. They need it, especially as an entrepreneur, as the buck stops with the Gilmore brothers when it comes to, that's your name on the sign, man. So,
and on that, here's the Nick Gilmore tip of the day.
New segment. I like that.
When somebody asks you, hey, how you doing? The answer is, I'm good. How are you?
Always good.
Nobody gives a fuck how you're doing. So you don't say, oh, I'm bleeding in my stomach. I'm doing a podcast from an office. There's shit everywhere. I got 15 fucking chairs in here. There's shit on my fucking fanny pack. I didn't have the right dongle to plug this fucking microphone in. This water is piss warm. I say, I'm doing great.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's the answer they want. So if you're somebody who doesn't answer like that, people will immediately think, fuck, I shouldn't ask that question.
And you
trust me.
Yeah. How many times have you asked that question and everyone went through what you just went to, and you're just like, oh, I just wanted, like, I was making niceties. Like,
it's an opening line.
Yeah, for sure. No, I get that. I've asked that one time. I was in junior hockey, and I asked the goalie that I was playing behind that night, like, how you feeling today? And he's like, oh, I didn't have a good warm up. I was, I feel like I got a bit of a fever. I'm not feeling it today. And in my head, I was a rookie goalie. And in my head, I was like, I am going in tonight for sure. And sure enough, man, halfway through the second, I get a tap. You're in. Go. He's awful tonight. I mean, I was probably awful too. No, I'm just kidding. But like, I, went in and I knew. And it was funny. I got in the net and I was like, why did I even ask? Not that it made a difference, but in my head, I was like, why did I even ask him how he's doing? Like, it just, and I made a commitment that moment. I remember this was many years ago. I was a 17-year-old goalie. And I was like, anybody ask me even if I'm on fire, I'm just going to say, no, I'm good. I'm good. Like, everything's good. Great. Feel great. Even if I feel like crap, because like you said, like most of the time people aren't genuinely asking you that, right?
Yeah.
And you have to, but we're not just saying it to devalue, how you're feeling mentally. We're saying that because you have a responsibility to your brand to make sure that you are good. And if you're not doing well, then you need to get the help that you deserve, or the help that you need. But you also have to project a certain way. Like, with all due respect, man, your partner's your brother. And if he's got things going on at his house and you come and you're telling him how awful your thing is, he's going to look at you and I know him. I know Jordan.
Yeah.
And he's going to look at you and be like, yeah, man, I don't know. Like, I got a bunch of kids and I got this and I got that. I got my own problems, right? Like, you got your problems. I'm not devaluing yours towards it, but I'm just saying, like, reality of it is, you know, brothers are different because you're buddies, but like, you got to show up.
You got to show up. You got to deal with your shit. Things happen and things suck. And you just got to learn how to stick handle and navigate these things in order to, you know, continue operating.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you feel like you don't want to do it and you don't feel like you can do it. But you got to get to that place where you can pull through. I feel like we've been super deep this fucking episode, but like, I always go like so crazy on you guys. Like, you need to work hard and like work. But I've had internal struggles like my whole life. I've always dealt with things and anxieties and depressions. And, you know, I'm not saying at what level or how badly, but to me, it was very bad. Mm-hmm. So you need to equip yourself with the skills and the tools to be able to get yourself, you know, through the mud.
Yeah.
Go to the mud, you know, go to the dirt and come out. And that was tough for me. But, you know, ultimately there's struggles. There's physical struggles, mental struggles, and then there's fucking things on fire and chairs everywhere in the office. But you got to be ready to deal with everything.
As you are. All right. Ready for some rant time?
Yeah.
All right, my friend. We got two questions for you today. Okay. So I know you like to know when the first one's up and when the second one's up. So I'm gonna give you two.
Okay.
All right. And we're gonna go from there. All right, here we go. Question number one. Quick fixes that people try in business. I want you to talk about the quick fixes that people try in business.
So something that we've run up against, or I've run up against in the past, my brother has given me huge insight into this, is people. So employees and people are huge parts of business. And I think sometimes we'll try and look at a quick fix for an employee. Like if somebody screws up, okay, or they do something wrong. Well, what can we, you know, what you yell at them, or, you know, you make them, you just deal with it. You react to it. When in fact, you should take the time to work with that person so that the mistake doesn't happen again. So instead of just yelling at them or firing them or whatever, you work with them to get them to the point where they need to be. And alternatively, you know, if they're operating at a high level and they ask for a raise, don't just give them the raise. Give them the raise with the expectations that they're going to take their performance to X, Y, or Z. And by setting these metrics and investing the time into your people who ultimately make your fucking business, that's how you set up the longevity to be able to continue on, is because you're working with people. But if you just are making knee-jerk reactions based on somebody's performance today, it won't last. Trust me, they'll forget by the next time they come in.
Okay, last one. Ready? Here we go. Talk about people who are loud about how to do things when they haven't been through it themselves.
Oh my God. I love that.
That was from our producer extraordinaire. I'll tell you that while you're having a drink of water.
We kind of touched on this, okay? We kind of touched on this before. And the loudest guy in the room is never the smartest guy in the room, okay? And I could say 1,000 of those fucking quotes. But Here's an example. Okay. When I opened up here in north of Kingston, I would have other business owners from different places would come in and be like, well, you went too big here. And I say business owners, like people who had been in business and gone out of business, right? So failed business owners. Oh, you went too big. Oh, this is too expensive. Oh, people in Harrowsmith won't pay this. Oh, you should carry this. Blah, 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 blah. But this isn't coming from fucking like your brother who owns successful food businesses or somebody else who runs successful businesses. I did talk to those people. Trust me. It came from people who had opened a business and failed. And they're telling me what to fucking do. Again, you appreciate it at the time and you say, thank you very much for your input. But it's suicide. Because at the time I was 25. Okay. And had I have listened to these people, and they're in their 50s. So when you're 25 and somebody who's 50 is saying, well, have you tried this? And they seem like they kind of know what they're talking about. Well, you try it. Luckily enough, I was smart and I was able to kind of filter that bullshit out. Because had I have done everything that they had told me to do, I would have been out of business. Okay? So you need to really be picky and specific with who you take advice from, who your mentors are, and you need to fucking tell Joe Honda Civic, who's out in the parking lot, revving his fucking engine, showing fucking Sue how to fucking loud his fucking new muffler is, and he's going to come in here and tell me how to buy a fucking $10 million building? Like, this is the fucking disconnect we have because it's so easy to put information out. Any jackass can have a podcast. Look at us. Right? But ultimately, we are delivering the goods. Look me up. I've done stuff. I'm no fucking Bill Gates, but I've done something right because whatever. If you want to take advice, take it from guys who have done it and fucking grinded it out. Not Buddy who can't work on fucking weekends or every other Monday because he's fucking lazy or he needs to go fishing. Like, give me a fucking break. Go to work, or don't. But don't come in and shoot your fucking mouth off because you've done nothing and you're trying to pretend like you're fucking Donald Trump behind the desk. Right? So learn how to filter these assholes out and learn how to pick your mentors and be picky with your mentors and learn how to shut your mouth and listen in business. I know I'm being animated, but people, here's a fucking funny, quick little anecdote. Somebody was talking to me a while back about business. And they proposed a business idea to me and they're like, here's my idea. They came with a formal presentation. So I looked at it and blah, blah, blah. So a couple of my questions were like, are you ready to give your life up? Are you ready to do this? Are you ready to do that? And they gave all the right answers that I wanted to hear as I had expected. And what I had said was, I have a very specific formula. And I have a lot of ideas that work for this type of a thing. Their immediate response back was, so do I. So you know what I thought? Done. Not because you have a lot of ideas, but because you are trying to now tell me what you can do after I've already listened. I know what you can do, but I've done it. So if you can do it, go do it yourself. Or why the fuck are you here?
I'm Nick Foley. Nick Gilmore. This is Cashrules.